Hello, everyone. My name is Rob, and with me today is Senior Education Consultant Chris Barron.
Hey, that's me.
AKA
Hello, everybody.
Tall Guy.
Oh, the tall guy.
The tall
We're gonna
guy,
go with that,
of course.
Yeah. All right,
yes.
everybody. I figured McQueenie's not here to reference me by my nickname.
Oh, no, we've got to keep it alive.
Yeah, we got to keep it.
Got to
keep
keep
it going.
alive. So today, one of the things we're talking about is a question that comes up often, especially for me and you, which is just to let everybody know, I know we're together today. We're not going to be talking about patching. Well,
Not specifically.
not specifically patching. Maybe patch related, we could say.
Patching adjacent.
Yes. Which this question does come up when we do patching. They're like, well, all the agents, when we set them out and the patch manager does its thing and says, I need you to download these patches and install them, is every agent going to go out and download the same file? You know, they all use the same patches. You know, they got Windows 10 throughout the office. They're all using that same patch. So why are we having 100 machines downloading? Well, we can stop that, right, Chris?
Yes, we can.
How can we
Robert.
stop that?
Well, we can set up a caching solution within ConnectWise Automate.
Oh, yeah?
Or, as our title is, go ahead
Cache
and
me outside.
Cache me
How
outside.
about that?
How about that? All right. Shall we talk about
I
today's
think we should
agenda?
probably, you know, we've talked about everything else. Maybe we should talk about what we're actually going to talk about.
Well, all right. Well, we're going to talk about setting up this caching solution. So when we're going through the setup process, there's really two main things we want to focus on. Getting our location settings up and running. There's a couple different ways we're going to do that. We're going to set our repository and the server and share drive we want to use to, and we're also going to kind of decide how we're going to use our credentials and which credentials we're going to use on that location. Next is, once we've got the location figured out and we know how we're going to use it, well, we need to adjust our template settings to actually tell our devices where to go and which credentials to use. So on the template, we're going to decide between our username and password and our admin username and admin password. So if that doesn't make any sense now, hold on. We're going to kind of break that down for you because depending on how you want to set this up is going to determine which credentials you want to use. Some people may use their own predetermined username and password for repository or share drive they set up. Others, you know what, we've already set it up for our deployments and defaults tab. Let's just point them to use those credentials. So we got a couple different ways we can do that. Within ConnectWise Automate, there usually is a couple different ways to do things. We're going to show you the two quick ways to get that set up. So now that we have it set up, well, we should probably check and make sure that it actually works.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
I
don't
know,
about
it's
all
crazy.
that.
It's
Whenever
crazy.
I test anything,
It's
I
crazy.
just test in production.
I know
okay?
I do it everything right off the bat, first time, boom, done.
Perfect.
Just send it out there. It's like when I write a script. I don't test it. I just run it on all agents. But we're going to go through, we're going to show you a quick way using the netuse command and the command prompt to just check and see if your credentials are valid and they're doing the things they're supposed to. We're going to check the device to make sure it's getting all the settings that you expect it to. And then we're going to go into the share drive and we're going to test deploying a patch and making sure it populates the share drive. So we check your credentials, we check your settings on your device, and then we'll go ahead and run a test and see if it actually populates that share drive. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you're ready to go.
I'm very excited about all of this.
He's very excited. So we're going to talk about caching setup or setting up this whole solution.
Is this where I go to the ATM and I put the card in and I put in a couple PIN numbers?
No, you just give me the card and then I'll do it for you.
See, this is why we're going to talk about the setup because
there you go.
I've already forgot how it goes.
Yep, his PIN number, Bosco. Weird. For all my Seinfeld fans out there. So on the location, we're going to start with that general tab. Now the general tab, we have a section down there that's going to give us these values to kind of set up. Down there at the bottom, when I open up my location, I'm on that general tab, as you can see here. We're going to focus on this script and template variables. Now in this section, we have the drive. This is going to be the share drive or my repository where all of my cached items are going to live. So we're going to set this up on the location. Debach, why on earth would we set this up at the location?
Let's see, I know there's something we always try to tell them about a location. Oh, I think because we know that every machine at that location can communicate with each other.
Oh, look at this guy. He must have been through our certification program. That's right, Mr. Debach. Is if you've ever heard us talk, we always talk about when you set up your locations, the main thing you want to do, regardless how you set up your locations, the bottom line is I want my devices to be able to talk to each other. Well, if I set up all my locations correctly, then if I put this repository in my location, I know all my devices should be able to access this drive. So if I go to, my case, I usually do it on a server. I go to that server, I create that folder, I share it out, I give it the credentials, I add the creds that need to access to read and write that file. Once I've set that up, I put that share drive in this field right here. Here's the path, whack server, whack folder. That's going to be where I'm going to store all of these items that I want to cache. Now, first thing I can do is I can put my username and password here. So I put in the share drive, and here, you know what? I can put in the username and password that has read and write access to the share drive. Can't stress that enough. Got to have control over that. Can't just have read, can't just have write. We got to have full control over this share drive, because we're going to download whatever solution we're going to. We're going to copy it over to that share drive, and we have to make sure that we have access to move files to and from. And when we test our credentials, I'll show you an easy way to test that. Right. So I have the ability, boom, I set up my share drive, I put on my location, put it on location because all my devices can get here because I set it up correctly, I shared it up, I gave it the right requirements. So here I can set it up right here, everything's golden. Now, for each location, yes, I would have to set up that share drive. But the username and password, I do have some flexibility. If I don't want to create or put in a username and password here, I do have the ability to use the same credentials I use in my Deployments and Defaults tab. So again, when you set up your location, we always tell you, hey, we have this field that's login to use for administrator access. When you first set up your location and you're going to deploy agents, hey, we test your credentials, we make sure we use an account that can actually download software, and I use this to install the agents, but I can also use that for my caching solution. So I can put in the share drive. I always have to put the share drive in. I can populate the username and password, or I can tell the device to just go to the Deployments Default section, use that login. So that could simplify the issue of having to put that in there. Well, I already know my location admin account already works. It's a domain account. It works at this location. Everything's perfect. I can just point all these devices to use that username and password. So again, a couple different ways to do here. Got to set up that drive. Have to do that. Can't skip that part. But I can kind of be flexible as where I put the username. If I don't want to store credentials in that general tab, I just don't want credentials in there, let's just go to the location, pull it from there, then I'm ready to rock and roll.
Yes. And once again, just like he said, there's usually more than one way to do this in Automate. So as he's just shown you, there's a little flexibility in this. I tend to probably would just go straight for the deployments and defaults and use that. That's what it's set for, to just kind of use that throughout Automate everywhere where we would download anything from the server or doing patches. However, it's just good to know that the main thing here is that both of these ways are done on the location. Okay, so whether we're doing that through the general tab or we're doing it through deployments and defaults and setting it up that way, it's always going to happen at the location. Because if we have location A in New York and then we have location B is all the way in LA, then there's probably a slim chance that it's going to be very effective at hitting a share all the way over in New York. So we've got to make sure that
the main reason we want to do it is to keep it local. We don't want all our devices outside of the network. We want to keep them inside the network. Hey, let's share it locally. So I don't have all of this bandwidth kind of usage going outside. Hey, let's put it in one repository and just point everybody in that direction. So I got my location set up, I figured out what I want to do, so now I need to set up my caching template. And this is just a template that we set up, and we just fill in the blanks moving forward. So here you can see, and I recommend setting up your own template. I know a lot of people have the tendency, it's like, oh, I'll just do this on the default template and I'll set it up there. I'm not a big proponent of that. If you look at our documentation, we say to create your own template because I want a caching template because I want to set up only devices I want to cache for caching. If I set up the default template, well then everybody's going to kind of get those settings, and maybe I don't have caching set up on every location, so I don't want to push it out to every location. For me, that's kind of the lazy way of doing anything. Is if I set up the default, hey, they're all going to get these things pushed out, but I'm not using it at every location. I only want to use it where I need to use it, just not carte blanche, just apply it because I can. So here is where, you know what, I'm going to set up, create my own template. For me, I set up LT Cache, and here I can set up my directory, username, and password. Now, cache directory, you can see we're using a variable here, a %drive%. What this field is actually looking for, when I say %drive%, it's mapping to that location where I set up that share drive. All right, so it's automatically looking in this template saying, oh, you're using %drive%. Okay, I know when I use that variable, it's mapping back to that location where I set up my share drive, my repository path. So my file path automatically mapped to that %drive%. You can statically put a drive in here, but again, I don't recommend that. Use the variables, tie it to a location, because if you do that, if you put in a static field in there, well, if it ever changes, you're going to have to kind of go through that, change it here, or just change it at the location. I can just use this. It's going to pull it from the location. If I use a static drive, well, then I have to create a template for every location that has that. Use the variable, simplify the process, just point it to the location. We're all good to go. Now I have my username and password. Now here is where I need to link how I set it up to the location with my template settings. So easy way to do that is, this is a variable, a quick and easy way to kind of fill that in. You can type that out, but it gets a little problematic, especially for the password, because if you type that out, it is going to be starred, so make sure you don't fat finger that guy. You can hit F2. Here, I highlight it. I can hit F2, and it's going to give me all of the variables that I can use here. So I can do that, the directory, username, or password. I hit F2. It's going to show me all the possibilities. So I have the ability to pick which one I want to use. So in my example here, I use username, and you can't see that, but it actually is %password%. If I just use username and password, nothing else, that's going to point to the location, that general tab, the username and password that I filled in when I put that file share in there. All right, it's going to pull it from there. If I want to point it to the deployments and defaults tab on the location, I'm going to use admin username and admin password. So regular username and password points to the general tab of the location. Admin username, admin password points to that deployments and default login for administrator use. So that's how you determine which one you want to use. So I set it at the location, and then I just tell the template, hey, which one am I going to use? So real easy, hit your F2, bada boom, bada bing. I have everything set up. Hit F2, boom. You can see here that it's a lot easier when I'm using the password. When I hit F2, hey, password %, because as soon as I hit enter, boom, it's going to star it out. And it is a variable, it's not locked in there, so you don't have to put in any passwords in here as well. It's another reason we use variables, because I don't want to manually put in a username and password here. Right. I want to just point it to the location where I know the credentials at that location are going to work. I don't do anything static here. I use the variable and I point them in that direction.
And that makes a lot of sense, because when we're telling people to develop their location settings and their deployments and defaults, we let them know that needs to be an admin password, because it's going to be doing a lot of other things within that network. Whereas the general tab, when we're setting that doesn't necessarily have to be an admin, just somebody that has access to a share on a network, so I can copy a file and paste it in there and then run it.
A lot of people, maybe they don't want to use their domain password for this, so you know what they're going to do? They're going to create the share, they're going to create an account specifically for caching.
Sharing.
Well, then I'm going to use that at the location on that general tab, and I'm just going to put that in there. If you're using your admin account for that location, then you just put admin username, admin password.
So just kind of remember, if you want to use the deployments and defaults, it's got to have admin in front of it on that replacement.
Correct.
So pretty easy.
So we set up the directory, the username and password, we've tied that to the location. So now we just got to determine what we actually want to cache. So here we have cache Windows updates, external URLs, server downloads. So this gives me the ability to just store everything in that share drive, so I don't have to point. If I want to download a file from a website, well, you know what? I don't want all my devices to go to this website, download the file. Well, let's just have somebody download it, put it in the repository, point them there, and then I have everybody going there. Same thing with Windows updates. If I'm patching my location and I have 50 devices and I say, hey, install this patch. Well, I have 50 devices all going to Windows updates at the same time. They're all downloading that patch locally and then installing it. Well, what I can do is that when I set up caching, hey, we're just going to tell, hey, go download this patch. The first one that gets it is going to put it there. The rest of them are going to say, hey, okay, I'm going to wait till that's finished and I'm just going to pull it locally from the repository. So again, this just lets us decide, hey, do I want to do updates? I do want to do updates and downloads, but I don't want to cache external URLs. I have the flexibility to kind of determine what specifically I want to use this caching solution for.
Absolutely.
So simple as that.
And also the way it works in the back end, just so, because some people have gotten this question, well, what if all the machines go out to grab this update at the same time? Well, what happens is actually, there is a timing sequence, first of all. We kind of scatter our agents when they're communicating, but the first one that comes in is actually going to put a dummy file in there when it's downloading it and modify
And I'll
it
show
later.
you a little bit later on when we're testing the share drive, I'll show you exactly what that dummy file looks like. So you can actually see, if you refresh that share drive as you're going through it, you can actually see that dummy file. And then so all the other devices are gonna be like, oh, wait, that's not there, but it's coming. So I'm just gonna wait in line, and if there's a line, we're just gonna wait our turn, and then we're gonna just get that file when it's ready to rock and roll.
Absolutely.
So now we've set everything up, so let's just verify everything. First thing, and I swear in all the times that I've talked about a caching solution, whenever there was a problem, probably 85 to 90% was a credentials issue. Is they were using an account that thought was set up for admin access, but it wasn't, or they created one and they only gave it read access and it wasn't able. You'll see it store that temporary file, but then it can't move the main file over because it doesn't have full access. So a quick and easy way to test your creds is just from a device at that location, or what's there is open up that device and let's go to the command prompt and let's just test the credentials. Let's sign in using the creds that we have. Let's map a drive to that location, to that share repository. Let's copy a file over. Let's delete a file. So that's going to give me the ability to say, hey, can I use this to map the drive? Yes, I can. Can I move a file over there? Yes, I can. Do I have access to delete the file? Yes, I can. Okay, these credentials should be good. So it's a very simple, easy way to do it. And we're just going to use NetUse X drive, which means, hey, I'm going to map the X drive to this path using these creds. And you can see I just open up my command prompt from the computer management screen of this device. NetUse, here is my repository. If you remember back to my first slide when I filled that in, that is my LabTech server. That is my LT cache. I'm going to use this user. Hey, it's domain, LT test environment, LT admin, and then I put password in here because it's actually going to type out the password. It's not going to mask it for you. So that's not really my password, I promise.
It's not?
Nope, mine is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I was wondering why you put my password up there.
But you're just going to put that in there. Here's the user I'm going to use. Boom, domain, then account, and then the passwords that's there. Now, if that works and I hit enter, I'm going to get this response. The command completed successfully. I'm like, okay, I tried to map this drive using these credentials. Was I able to get to this repository from this device that I'm going to pull all of these cached updates or whatever I have there? Yes. All right. Step one, boom, command completed successfully. I successfully able to map that drive using these creds. So I can check and make sure just by simply reusing, just type in NetUse, hit enter, and it's going to say, hey, okay, X local remote, here it is, Microsoft Windows Network. This just gives me the ability to see, hey, is everything mapped correctly? It just shows me all the NetUse that's going on in this session. So now what I want to do is I have just a file that I have locally. Here on my C drive, I have just a test.txt file, and all I want to do is copy from C that file to X. So really basic commands here. So not really reinventing the wheel here. We're just kind of, hey, use these credentials. Here's what I want to do. I want to copy the file over, one file copy. Okay, step 2 done. Is I verified I mapped the drive. Now, can I copy a file from here to the share drive? I'm going locally, I'm going to the share drive because that's what we're going to do. We're going to download the patch locally and we're going to copy it over to the share drive. That's what we're doing, we're caching. So when I'm caching my Windows updates, I download it locally, I have it, and then I move it over for all the other devices to use. So I got to make sure that that copy works. All right, and then I can also take a look as I'm going through here is I have my PC, this is my LT cache repository. Hey, I can refresh that screen. I should have that test file show up. So I did the copy. It said it was completed successfully, but you know what? Let's double check. Let's go to the repository. Yes, I now have that test file. Hey, it copied over successfully.
Right.
Easy peasy. I'm cooking with gas here. Last thing I want to be able to do is I've got to be able to delete the file. So we're going to set that cache repository. We're going to put that dummy file in it. But once we're done, we got to be able to delete that file. All right, because we don't want people looking at that saying, oh, it's not ready, or hey, let's clean up our system. So here, I'm just going delete X, which is the X drive that I mapped, test.txt. I'm just going to delete that test file. When you issue that command, hey, we're going to say, hey, are you sure you want to execute this delete command? Because we know what a delete command is. It actually
I'm
deletes
pretty
stuff.
sure.
So yes, it's actually going to show you that in the command prompt. I'm going to say yes, and then boom, I refresh my LT cache, and I know that my creds allow me to use this command to map a drive, copy a file, delete the file. So again, this solves probably 90% of the problems if you have caching set up. Just an easy way to kind of set that up. We don't specifically use net use commands, but that's pretty much the same pattern is what's going to be happening in the background. So talking to our dev people, they're saying, yeah, if you can test the net use, that's
Right.
an easy way to test it. And I'm like, all right, cool, we'll go with net use.
Yes, which is weird. I like the way this is all set up. It's very comprehensive. Coming from when I was actually testing the software myself, this kind of speaks to me, but it's basically what you are doing is literally on the back end, what we're going to do is everything he's gone through. We're going to use this session. So what he's doing when he does net use is he may not be logged in under that user specifically, but what it's telling on the back end is log in with this user's credentials using this user session. So once you're in under this user session, it's pretty much exactly like what Automate is going to be doing on the back end. So if you know you can delete, you know you can make that mapped network drive, and you can delete the file, then it should be 9 times out of 10 good to go. And like he said, it's not good enough just to wait for that message to come back, completed successfully.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's very rare, but you do get false positives from time to time from software. Maybe it didn't map that error code it got back correctly, or it wasn't in there. And so it's just going to give you a generic, hey, completed successfully, because I don't know what it just told me. So it's always good to go right into that folder in that directory. Did it make that file? Did it delete that file? Yes? All right. I think
Especially
we're
when
good.
you're setting it up for the first time. I want to
Yes.
make sure that you might not go through it every time you do it, obviously, but hey, I want to make sure this all works. Let me refresh it. Okay, it's doing exactly what I expect it to. And that's everything within ConnectWise Automate. Hey, test it. All right, cool. All right, let's move forward.
But once you've manually done it once, hey, you're gold. It's all automated from there.
So now we know our credentials work. We set it up at the location, we picked the username we want to use, we tested those, all right, cool. Let's make sure the device is set up the way we want it. So an easy way to do that is go into the device, the automation tiles, and we're going to look at the effective policy. This is going to show me all the settings that currently applied to this device. This allows me to see, you know what, is the template being applied here, applying the settings that I'm expecting? I expect it to use the admin username. Well, let's verify that it's actually using that by going to the device and checking to make sure it's working correctly, or just to make sure the settings are getting pushed down to the device. Maybe I set up my template, but you know what? Another template was overriding it. So I wanted to check and make sure it's actually getting the settings appropriately. So if I open up my device and I go from the automation little cog wheel here, over to templates, current computer config. This is going to show me all the settings that are currently applied to this device. I have a list of templates over here based on all of these templates. Here's all the settings that are currently being applied. And I can kind of take a look at it. Well, I have a section, folders and cache. Temp directory is Windows temp, which is just a temp directory. My cache directory, hey, is it pointing to the right server and file share for this device? Oh, sure enough, LT server, LT cache, that's the one I want. Which username is it using? Well, it's using my cache username, lttest-env-lt-admin, and you can see it is going to start out that password.
Where's those stars coming from? You're always using stars in
Always
your
using
password.
the stars.
I don't get it.
know. That's how I freak it out, is I actually use stars, but you don't really know that. So here, okay, current computer config. Well, maybe I'm in here, I'm like, whoa, 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 it's using this password, but that's not really the one that I want. This is the current computer config, which is getting applied. So, well, if this is getting applied and this is not what I want, I need to find the template that's actually applying that. Here's where it's easy. If I create my own template, LT cache, well, let me see what's going on in that LT cache template. Here you can see it's a little bit different. Folders and cache, cache directory. Hey, %drive %. Just pulling that template variable that we set, and it's just going, hey, well, this is telling me to go to the location. So I knew from this file it was pointing in the right directory, but I don't want it using the username. Oh, no, that's supposed to be %admin username. I forgot that I wanted to use that one, but you know what? I forgot to set the template, so now it's trying to pull in that location setting, and oh, that's not the right one because you know what? I didn't set that up, but blah, blah, blah. Whatever it was, you can just verify that you're using the right credentials. So if I go to that template, I name it. This is another reason why I just love having it do its own thing, because default I'd have to scroll through, find out what it is, change my default, check to see what the priority of that is. If anything else is, setting that up, I'm like, you know what, if I just create my template correctly the first time and kind of isolate it, hey, it's right here, it does its thing, I come in here, boom, I only have to mess with this. So here, drive, %username %, oh, that's not the right one. You know what? I need to open up that template. I need to kind of do that. Well, from here, if I double click on the LT cache, I can't open up that template from here, so I can adjust it. So, oh, that's not right. Open it up, double click, boom. Here I can hit F2. I can change that to admin username. Make sure you also change the password to admin password, because you know what? Those two go together, and I can adjust it here. So again, we tested our credentials, make sure we can use those in the back end. I want to make sure that the device is actually pulling all the right settings that I expect it to, pointing in the right directory, using the right username, using the right password. I can go to the effective policy, I can check the templates, check the current computer config, see what everything is. Oh, that doesn't seem to be right. Okay, let me go to the template. Let me check the actual settings on that template, because you can see here it's pulling. This shows you what the actual values are. But if I go to the template, it's going to show the variables that are pulling there. So if you see, I'm like, oh, why is it using that username? Oh, let me go to the actual template.
Admin username.
Yeah,
right?
and I can go %. Oh, no, that's not right. I need to change it. Boom, double click, easy peasy. Now with any template changes, make sure if you make any template changes, you got to submit the update config command to actually apply all these changes. Okay, don't forget about that last step. All of our templates, if I make any changes to the templates, that update config command's got to run to actually apply any changes.
And nobody has time to wait around for it.
Nobody.
Let's just do it.
Yeah.
I always like bringing that up, and I know we bring it up a lot, but honestly, whenever you're troubleshooting an agent or agent behaviors, this is always where you're going to start.
Yep.
Whether it's going to be a template issue, a monitor issue, groups issues, this is exactly where you're going to go to just go ahead and get through all this information and find out why it's doing that.
All right, we've checked our credentials. We know our settings are right.
There's
Let's
still
see if it
something
works.
missing.
Yeah, let's actually.
Sure,
Yeah.
let's run it.
Yeah, let's see if it actually populates with anything. All right, so, well, since it is us, you know what? I might
You're going to make a liar out of me, aren't you?
We're gonna test a patch.
That's it. I'm getting out of
I
here.
told you it was like patching adjacent.
Yeah.
So we're gonna little bit.
This is almost too adjacent.
So here, easy way to test it is I open up a device. I find a device that's like, okay, here's an approved patch that's, you know what, hasn't been attempted yet. So you know what, I can right click on that and I can just click install patch now. And this is just gonna send that command, hey, let's install this patch. Let's see if it works. So when I hit this command, and if I go to the commands tab, while it's executing, you can see I brought up my LT cache repository. When it's executing, the first thing it's going to do is like, well, before anybody else tries to do this, place this holder, this cache file holder, with the name of that actual patch. So that's what it's going to do first. It's like, hey, I'm going to get this. Let me go ahead and set this temporary path so anybody else trying to do this is going to look in this repository and say, oh, somebody's already got that. I'm just going to stand down and I'm going to wait till it's completed. Then I'm going to pull it from this repository. So sometimes, depending on the patch, you got to be pretty quick. So I set this, the command, I'm executing, I'm refreshing, and boom, oh, there's that cache file. Then I took a screenshot. Because depending on the patch, it might not take that long before I refresh again. And you know what? That cache file is gone because we deleted it. That's why we test to make sure I can delete a file. And then boom, here is the actual file name. You can see that that's the same file name. This is a Silverlight. So I actually downloaded this patch to my LT cache repository. So again, real easy to test if everything's working. I test my credentials, make sure the settings are correct. All right, let's just test it and see if that's populating. So hopefully if you've set everything up, and you can see when I set this presentation up, I did everything in that order. I tested it, I checked my settings, and then I did this all on the same day, and boom, everything just kind of rolled through, and I was able to successfully cache a patch. And it installed correctly, so anybody else, instead of going to the download site, Windows Update site, it's going to go here. Now, one thing I always get asked is like, well, what if, for whatever reason, that server's down and they can't get to the repository? Does that mean it's not going to patch? No. What it's going to do is like, hey, I'm going to check the location because my template tells me to. I'm going to go there. Oh, I can't access that drive. Well, okay, I tried. I'm going to go to the Windows Update site and I'm going to download it. So if the repository is full, or the server's offline, or it can't communicate, it doesn't mean it's not going to get patches. It's just going to bypass it. It's going to try, I can't do it. Then it's going to go to the Windows Update site. Another point is when you set this up, this doesn't have anything out of the box that's going to tell you, hey, your share drive is full. You have to man that on your own. All right, you can create a monitor to see if it's running out of space, but we don't have that for you. That's not part of the solution.
Right.
So just be cognizant of the fact that patches, they have a tendency to populate a lot of space. So just make sure you're keeping an eye on the actual file size of that repository. That's why we like putting on a server, dedicate a lot of space to it. You shouldn't have any problems. Just remember to go back and prune.
I've seen some pretty big patches,
Oh, yeah.
especially initials, when the initial system comes on. That's why I'm saying. And if you think about how big that share folder gets in, imagine how many times you would have downloaded all of that across the network with every machine having to do that. So you're saving. This is why I kid that we're not talking about patching, but honestly, if you're utilizing patching as a service, you're going to want to utilize caching, because one of the best ways to add value in that scenario is to decrease the impact on the network.
Keep everything local.
Right. So.
All right. So we've tested the credentials. We got our settings on the device. We actually tested it to make sure it's good. So now, last thing, a little bonus is, well, how do I automate this? Well, the same way.
I was wondering when we were going to get to that. All this manual testing and this manual stuff, it's like, this is not in our nature.
Now that I know it works, well, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an EDF. I'm going to put it on all my devices saying, hey, you know what? Caching is enabled. So this gives me the ability to say, hey, check this box because I'm going to turn caching on for the devices I want. I'm going to create a search looking to see if that box is checked. You can see real easy, caching enabled true, boom, all these devices currently have that box checked. And then I'm going to tie that search to its own group. Now here I'm using my caching enabled limit to search, and here's where I'm actually assigning my LT cache template with a priority of 1. That's a high priority. It's going to trump anything but a 0, so that should get you up and running and you shouldn't have any other issues. If somebody set it at the default template level, this will override it. So you create that customized solution, you automate it, keep it simple, bada boom. If I want to add a next step, is I can create a search that's actually going to check that box on all the devices. That would be the next step if I want to kind of create a total automate solution.
Absolutely.
And boom, we
And
always
that's
end
it, end to end,
automating
right
it.
there. Always
That's
ending on the automate. Now they go have coffee, crullers, and they just relax, right?
Done. Once you
Everything's
test
done.
it, all
We're
right,
on the
cool.
job now.
Hello. Hello, everybody. How we all doing out there?
I'm doing fine. How about you?
I'm fine.
fine,
I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about some caching.
In
answer
case they've
some-
forgotten,
answer some
during the
questions.
interim, I'm Rob DeBach, and
My name is Chris Barron, and we are your caching crew.
we are the caching crew,
we are
aren't
the
we? We're
caching
the
crew.
caching crew. I like that
There
name.
we go.
You know what, though? The only question I have about caching, forget about them for a while. The only thing I want to know is, what's your PIN number?
I can't remember it.
I bet I can get a lot of cash
go
with that,
with-
huh?
yeah,
He
I
makes
dou-
the big bucks around here.
I
He's
doubt-
the senior around here. So
I doubt it. Yeah, I'm also, I won't say any marriage jokes. All right, so how about we just dive into the questions?
Drive right into it. Look at Artie there, man. He's still partying from his Cinco de Mayo days over there.
Yeah, he looks like he's a little under the weather there.
But he's ready to tackle on these questions. We started getting this one actually right after LabTech 11 had dropped. I remember this kind of coming in through the waves. But basically they're saying since they upgraded to 11, and I know this also affects 10.5, maybe somewhere around patch 5, somewhere in there. I can't be, I don't know exactly which one it was, but I know at some point we started showing that mapped drive that we make when we do the caching again, right? Except it was showing up as a disconnected drive. And even more so, there were some partners, I guess I was hearing stories where this was actually interfering with clients who had rightly set an XMAP drive for something else that they had on their network. So when that shows up under their user account, obviously it interferes with the X because we use that as a default on the caching, which there are methods though of actually changing that, right? When we're developing that, we actually put that pipe in there and we put in the W. I believe that's in the dash.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you can specify whatever drive you
Right.
want. By default, we're going to use the X drive. When you're on the template and you do %drive %,
Right.
we're going to look at the location. We're automatically going to map the X drive. That's what we're going to do behind
That's
the
the
scenes.
default one, right?
If you don't want to use X, then you go %drive %pipe, and then A, B, C, D, well, probably not A, but any other drive you're not using in your environment. So if you are using X, there is a way around that. But anyway,
It really shouldn't be an issue to begin with, though, because it
Yeah.
shouldn't be showing up. So it is a legitimate issue. I'm just kind of stating that just in case that ever comes up
Yep.
again. A workaround is maybe just go in there and set that cache to be B, which to me B is a pretty safe one. That's your old 5 1/4 default drives back there. I'm pretty sure we don't have any clients out there monitoring 5 1/4, but I don't know. We're still using tapes for
I don't-
backup too.
I don't
so
judge
I'm not gonna
whatever you're
touch
using.
that one. But just to answer this question, we have actually taken care of this issue. So that's going to take care of because they were both related. So whether it's a trouble with the client, they can't use their X drive because it's interfering with it, or they just see this disconnected drive all the time, and it's still showing up in your systems. And just know you need to probably patch up to patch 11, and that will get rid of that issue, and all your local users will no longer see that. So,
cool.
absolutely.
All right, so moving on to more questions. We had a gentleman ask kind of a slew of questions. I'm like, oh, this kind of covers most of the questions you usually get. So we're just going to kind of show these, kind of break these down individually. So the first question is, how do you know the patch bandwidth? Well, the best way to do that is to be, kind of monitoring your network and just kind of be taking a look at it when you're patching. So by default, I know we used to always patch from 3 to 5. So if you see, you're monitoring your network and you see a spike in bandwidth around the time you're patching, you're going to know that it's probably, hey, all my devices are going out there and they're trying to download everything and it's kind of saturating what I have here, and that's kind of be a good way to do it. And that's a good reason is to kind of do that, and also to kind of patch off hours is to kind of separate that from all the other bandwidth that's going to be utilized during the course of the day. So not a big fan of patching machines during the day, but I understand that sometimes that's the only time you can get them on the network, and I understand that. So kind of leveraging that and trying to figure out when you're going to see that traffic, that's about the best way. There isn't any way that we're going to be able to tell you unless you're setting up, some monitoring to kind of see what's going on during that time.
Yeah, basically you need, your method is the best to get you right in the ballpark. Obviously, if we're patching between 3 and 5, and we see this enormous amount of bandwidth being used during those times, and most likely it's going to be that case. And we can always test that by, we shift that then to 1 to 2, right, for patching, and see, did it follow that shift?
Yeah.
If it followed the shift, then yes, all that bandwidth is being consumed by the patches. But if you really want to get specific and find out about, what network traffic and what exactly that bandwidth is during that time on patching, then you definitely need some kind of monitoring network analyzer that's looking out there and actually parsing all the headers and everything and figuring out what kind of traffic this is, so you can figure out, how much of this traffic and this bandwidth was used to access MS Update site, right? But just out of the box, really, you'd have to set something up to kind of configure that.
It's not going to be part of the caching solution that you're set up.
Right.
You're just going to be able to tell within that. It's going to be kind of a separate tool to kind of track that traffic and see what's going on during that time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. When should you cache? Well, if we tie it to the above question, if you see that your bandwidth is getting, the life sucked out of it, then that's probably when you should start caching. Now, that doesn't mean the only time is when you have bandwidth issues, or maybe you just want to kind of simplify things, and you know what, caching is a lot cleaner kind of process. Instead of having to worry about all your devices going to the Windows Update site, hey, let's keep it local just to kind of save that. And also, talking about caching and kind of setting up this repository, it reminded me of a conversation I had with a partner back in the day, and it's like, I have, bandwidth issues where I have all these devices, and sometimes I got to patch during the day, and I don't really want to do that. What's a good way to not only set up caching, but kind of fill up the repository so I'm not doing it while I'm trying to do all these machines. And we come up with a solution of, well, if you kind of want to get that populated ahead of time, what you can do is set aside a few machines or OSs that you know that need the patches, and you set them to patch earlier than the rest of your devices. And the reason you do that, let's say I grab a Windows 7, Windows 10 and an 08 and a 12 server, and you know what, I know they're lax on patches, so let me go ahead and patch those on Monday. So when those go through, well, they're already going to go through and download and put those files in my repository. So when I get later down the week and all the rest of my devices are going to start patching, well, it's not like I'm going to sit in there, hold that kind of temp file. Well, it's going to go directly see that, oh, it's already there. Okay, I'm going to get it. So you can set it up where, hey, let me try and fill this repository a little bit before, you know, I have a bunch of patches that have to go through, and that can also kind of speed up the process and kind of limit the resources that are going through. So kind of talking to the partner, kind of figuring that out was kind of cool. We're like, hey, you know what, just patch, grab a couple machines,
Right.
patch them early. That way when the rest of your machines are ready to patch, you already have that repository. Now that being said, just want to remind you that you have to keep an eye on that repository, that shared drive. We're not gonna have a monitor on that for you. You can definitely monitor the size of that drive, so you can kind of get a notice or an alert that that's filling up. So just kind of be cognizant of that as you start loading up these patches. That's going to fill up pretty darn quick.
Absolutely. Caching is just very important when it comes to patching, because like you said, the files are big, so you are going to be eating bandwidth, and it's going to be exponential as we bring these on. But that's a great point he brings up about, you know, just take a few boxes that are basically indicative of what the network, it's a snapshot of what the whole network looks like. So they're going to go ahead and patch a couple days before to kind of break up that cache. But this works great in those areas that have low bandwidth over the internet, right? Because if you've got a country or something you're dealing with, another client in another country, and they've got low bandwidth, what's happening is it's taking so long for it to download that file that all the machines queued up behind them, behind that temp file, actually miss their window by the time it gets done downloading and installing on that one machine. So that's a great way of getting around any kind of lag or bandwidth issues you have from a client in one of those countries. So good tips.
All right, so we had another partner that's saying, well, we have locations where we only have 5 workstations. Right. Well, okay, for 5 workstations, do you need to create a caching solution? If you see an issue with 5 workstations, but also kind of take into consideration, well, I only have workstations here, so can I create a cache repository on a workstation and still, you know, when I create that shared drive, am I going to have enough space on that drive wherever I put it? Because you have to stay local, so that means you're going to have to build that shared drive on one of those workstations. Not ideal, but you still can do it as long as you set that up correctly. But again, you need to monitor that size of that drive, whatever you create, to make sure you don't saturate all the space in there. But it is definitely possible. Same thing with 20 workstations. Now you're getting to where, okay, 5 machines at the same time, maybe not that big a deal. Okay, now I have 20, so now I may want to kind of set a couple aside where I kind of patch a few days before the rest of them to kind of save me some issues later on. And maybe I pick one of those workstations, one that I know is going to kind of be on, and if I want to patch differently to make sure that it's going to load all those files and I have enough space in there. So the key kind of commonality here is, hey, I need space and I need to be monitoring that. And it depends on kind of what's going on in my environment. Same thing, now we have a server. Okay, now a server, that typically may have a little more space on it, so I can kind of use that to kind of do it. But the one thing about the 6 workstations to one server, well, now I don't really have if I'm storing it on the server and I want to kind of patch, well, make sure I'm patching, you know, my workstations ahead of time, because I only have one server. I want to make sure if I set up that, hey, patch first and then the rest of them later, make sure I get that workstation in there, so I'm not just loading up the server patches on that drive. And then again, you know, we have all these combinations and you kind of see the theme, and that's why I kind of brought them in one at a time. Well, okay, it depends on the situation. Right. What do I have? What are my resources? 50 workstations. Do I have one that I can kind of store all these patches? Because now, wow, I'm going to need a lot of space to store 50 patches. They may all be different OSs, It might be simple if I have 5 workstations or 20 workstations. Hey, they're all Windows 10. They're all going to have the same patches. Okay, now 50. Well, you know what? I still have some XPs that I'm going to download to this repository. I have a couple 8s sprinkled in there, a few 7s and a 10. And now you kind of see, forget about Vista. So now you kind of see as I start piling this on how the scenarios change because, well, each OS are going to have its different patches. So I'm going to have to accommodate for the room for all these different OSs, all the separate patches. Am I all storing them in the same file share? I just got to take all this into consideration when I'm kind of designing that cache solution. Bottom line is, hey, I have to keep monitoring it. Every situation is going to be different, but you know, if you find you're having issues, then you kind of set that up accordingly. If you really have issues, you can always say, well, I don't have one machine that's going to be able to handle that. Well, okay, then I make one location that's got 25 workstations and I create a file repository. Then I have 25. If I can split them out into 2 different locations, okay, then I'm not kind of sharing it. Well, I have all of my older machines, so you know what, I have all of those in one location, my newer machines in one, or kind of setting it up where I don't have all of the patches on one location. I can kind of split that up and handle that accordingly. So millions of different combinations and everything you're going in here, and I like this because this allowed us to answer pretty much all the questions that I usually get when talking about caching is, hey, here are the things. I'm like, okay, well, let's just kind of talk about them one at a time.
I'm actually a little disappointed he couldn't get all million on here, but, you know. But that is the point. There are so many combinations out there, and that's one of the frustrating parts about being on this side of it too, is that you want to help everybody out, and you try to build up these materials as much as you can. But the problem is thinking about all these situations. There's so many edge cases out there that we couldn't possibly figure out everything. But the main thing is if you can consider the concept that what we're looking at is some kind of balance between all that bandwidth and that lag that we're creating on a network and the storage that we've got to keep all of this on, right? Which one is actually hurting us worse? Which one's more impactful to the client, actually? Is it more impactful that I'm saving all these and eating up all that storage space? Or is the issue actually the network bandwidth and the traffic from all this patching? Which one's impacting them the most? And where can I add that value? Is caching going to add that value, or is it not? If it doesn't add value, then it probably just don't need it, right?
Yeah, and you'll see a lot of these problems only occur when I set this up for the first time or I get a new client because you know, odds are when you start patching, it's going to be that initial push where, oh, all these machines are out of date, or I have a new device. Oh, my goodness, I have all this stuff to do. But once everything is set up, well, you should only have to worry about new patches coming in and getting updated every Microsoft Patch Tuesday, and that kind of differs with the amount of patches. So the initial setup and the initial thing kind of getting all this kind of smoothed out might be a little problematic, but then, you know, once you have everything set up and you have everything, well, it's kind of one of those things where, okay, if I set a monitor to watch that drive, then you know what, it's kind of like I know it's working. I went through the credentials, I've tested it. Hey, I've seen it actually populate.
Something's going in there.
You know, once you get there, it's, you know, it's something's usually it's not the case where something automatically changes and this just stops working. It's kind of all of this front end work, and then you're like, okay, now I just got to monitor the repository that I have. And also, so the last thing is one of those is like some are work groups, so common credentials is spotty. So now we're looking at local accounts, and that's where I usually kind of point you to using the deployments and defaults on the location,
right?
Because you can set up, when I build a client, when I build a location, I can set passwords at the passwords tab that's on those, and I can put domain accounts and I can put local accounts in there. So if I have a location where I can put a local admin on all the devices, then I can just use that deployments and defaults and kind of point in that direction, because odds are if I have workgroups, I have local accounts, well, I had to get all of my agent, all my stuff installed there to begin with.
Somehow.
So let's use that same username and password that I kind of use there as well. So as long as we have communication with the device, we should be able to use the credentials that we're using to install the agent and all that. So you can just kind of set that deployment default tab and use a local admin. And that is completely useful. I know we kind of always use that example of a domain because, you know, probably most of our environments are going to be domain, but we do have those offshoots, or we do have the one areas where 5 workstations. Come on, do I need to have those on a domain? No, it's a work group, and well, they all have the the same login locally. I'm like, well, okay, let's use that. Let's put that in my
Right.
deployments and defaults tab on my location, and then I should be able to rock and roll.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to have these workshops, come up because there's no sense in swatting flies with sledgehammers, right?
Yeah.
So, but yes, as long as that credential is the same, we should be able, I mean, you set it on there and it uses the machine, we're just accessing the share on it. So as long as we have that credential for that local admin account going into it, it's going to be able to communicate with it and go ahead and grab that. So work group, domain, just as long as the credentials are there, we should be all right with that.
Yeah,
right?
as long as they can communicate, and we always stress this whenever we talk about building
That's why they've got to be in a
locations.
location, right?
Yeah, is we always stress when I build a location, I don't care if it's a subnet network, it's physical address, or whatever it is, we just want the devices to be able to talk to each other. Well, if we kind of go and kind of build on that kind of modality, then, well, when I come back and cache, well, we use the location because I've already set my locations and I
established
know
communication
that they
there.
can all talk to each other because, that was kind of our recommended practice from the get-go, and why we always stress it, because, hey, if you build it this way here, as you start adding layers and pieces to it later on, then everything kind of falls into place and you have less troubleshooting and less worries.
It's good stuff. So we've gotten Patchman bandwidth down. We've gotten some issues with the letter drives down. Are there any issues out there that anybody has maybe perhaps we can discuss? You're more than welcome to use the Q&A panel down here, and we can get to those questions at this time as well. It's what we're here for. We're here for you, ready to cash this out. So you want to cash me outside? How about that? Well, right now we don't appear to have anything in there. Is there anything we want to demo out maybe just to give them a little bit more?
I mean, we can always...
I mean, it is pretty straightforward. I mean,
Yeah.
it's caching. All we're doing basically here is we're setting up a repository somewhere on a network.
And I was kind of, you can see my screen now. This is me kind of setting up my net use command to kind of track it. Here it all is here. Net use, okay. Here, we
Right.
just want to kind of show you, hey, what's the local network and the status we are. You can see I didn't put any drive in there. I use net use X because that's the one we're going to use. So I troubleshoot with that. Hey, if the X doesn't work, well, okay, then I know to go back into my template. I know to go back into my caching template. Then I'm going to come in here that if I want to kind of change this and use his suggestion, hey, I'm going to use that drive, but I'm going to use
the letter B.
I'm going to use the letter B or whatever one I know is going to work. So that allows me to kind of set that up. And while I'm here, I might as well demo, hey, this is here. This is my own template. I always recommend setting up your own template for caching because that's the way I want it to work. I want to kind of dictate who I want to set up for caching. I don't want it to be global. So I don't use that. And for whatever reason, if these values, oh, I don't know, I can't remember what those were, just always remember that I can always F2 when I'm in, and that's not F2, sorry. Try that again.
Yeah, it's going to give them a drop down basically of all the replacements that we can use for these. Which is usually the easiest way to go because I don't know about you guys, but I'm all thumbs when it comes to typing sometimes, and I get these wrong all the time.
So if you want a list in here, so just like our scripting, every time you hit the F2, you're going to get this field where you can kind of pick and choose what variables you want to use. For this, I'm going to use drive. Just to remind you, with all of our variables that I always have to hit the enter key, if I just go to username, oh, it didn't actually save it. So here I go to F2, drive, I hit enter, that puts that variable in here. And this is kind of just the kind of showing you the difference between using the username, which is %drive%. That's the one that's going to map specifically to my main location. So if this device or all my devices, it's going to point me here. So that %drive% is going to be here. And then if I say %username%, it's going to look in this field and populate it that way. And the same thing with %password, not outer address, %password. So that's the combination that is going to point to my location for the share drive and also the credentials, the username and the password that I put there. And always happens. And the reason I always like showing the password, because you can type %password%, but as soon as you do that, you know what? It's going to star it out. So if I were to try to do this by hand, I have to pray that I am not going to fat finger that. And you know what? No,
that wasn't. I can tell from here.
Sorry,
that wasn't a
I can't do
percent.
it.
I think you used the @ symbol.
I can't do it. So
Yeah.
that's the main reason why I show you that, because that password is going to be hidden. This is the combination that points to my location, and it's going to say, hey, use this drive, use this username, use this password. Now, if I want to use the Deployments and Defaults tab, and let's say here, well, you know what, for this location, I had my domain account, which is there, but maybe I wanted to put in a local admin.
Which is just similar to setup. We just got to make sure we've got that whack, as you like to call it.
Yeah. So here, now I have my domain account and I have my local account, and that's saved in my password. So each client, each location, I'm going to have credentials that I know is going to work, whether it's domain account, where it's local. I have the ability to save that password. Now I'll go ahead and close that and open it back up so I know it works. So now when I come in here, hey, I can use that local admin, I can use that LT admin, and I can kind of say, well, it's a work group, and I use that local admin for this specific location. And it could be a client where, you know what, on my client I have 20 locations, but only one location is a work group because it's only got that 5 workstations. Well, I can go to that location, put that password specifically, and allow me to take it from that drop-down, and boom, I can use that local admin. So now I save that. Now I have to adjust my template because my username and password, that points to the general tab of the location. If I want to use the one that's in my Deployments and Defaults tab, that's my admin username, and admin password. There we go.
It's a tricky one, though.
So now I was directing it towards the location, that general tab, but then I had that one location that's got the 5 workstations, they're all work group. Well, there I got to use my local account. So then I save that, and that will point them to use that local account. Now see, I set that up, and if I want to, like, well, I want these to use that, and I want those to use that, well, then you're going to have to unfortunately use two different templates. Yeah. But if you can keep it consistent one way or the other, that's why, you know, if I have a local account or I have a domain account, if I store those on my client and I store those in my location, then I don't have to open up each location. I got to put the drive information in my location, but I don't have to worry about the username and password. I can just kind of use that one template. So it's either kind of use this way or use that way. You can't use both unless you want to kind of create 2 additional or 2 separate templates to kind of get you to use that.
Absolutely. And when you notice, when he was testing that out, when you use that netuse command, we actually have you use netuse with a drive letter. That's because that's what we actually are doing on the back end. You don't see that map network drive unless you have that issue pre-patch 11. But that's actually what it does on the background. It's still mapping that. It's not actually just using the UNC only. We're still mapping those drives. So that's why you have that option, if you have to go ahead and change that letter in case issues like that do come up. But it should be used in the system session now, and we shouldn't have any issues. It should be hidden. So, and I think that's it, man. I've got no questions in here. I think we've learned them some, man. I think they are. I think they're ready to cash out on caching.
I think hopefully. That's what I'm hoping for. That's why we're here.
That's why we're here. But if you do have any questions, you can always get a hold of us, though, right?
Yep. Go ahead and submit your question to education@connectwise.com. Just mention this webinar, and we'll reach out to you, and we'll give you all the answers that you're looking for.
Absolutely. So until next time, I suppose.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Take care.
Take it easy.